What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to another video, and in today's video we're going to be talking about a movie I got to check out just a little bit early, and that movie is called The Good Mother. Directed by Joris-Peyrafitte, who wrote this film alongside Madison Harrison. This film stars people like Hilary, Swank, Reynor, Olivia, Cooke, and more. So before we get too far into this, as I typically like to do, I'd like to say a huge thanks to those kind folks over at Vertical Entertainment for sending me over another early screener for one of their movies. Always a pleasure to check out any of their movies, whether I enjoy them or not. And today we're talking about The Good Mother, which actually drops later this week on the 1st of September and stars people like Hilary Swank in the leading role. And it's been quite some time since I've seen a movie with her in the leading role. So when I saw the poster, when I saw the email for the screener link, I was more than excited to check out this movie. And I went into it, as I usually like to do with these early screener reviews, with absolutely no knowledge whatsoever. I didn't read a synopsis, I didn't watch a trailer, I'd only seen the title and the poster, and I was all in. And as I got closer to actually watching the movie myself, I saw that Olivia Cooke was in this film, as well as Reynor, which excited me even more. You have some big names in a movie that I'm getting to check out a little bit early. So without further ado, let's get into my thoughts on this movie, but most notably, let's get into what this movie is all about, just the base premise without getting too deep into spoilers. So when the movie opens and we're introduced to Hilary Swank's character, we learn that she is a woman who's grieving the loss of her husband, and because of this, she's become an alcoholic. On top of that, we learn that she's no longer the woman she was in her career field, as she was a writer for a newspaper in New York City, but has now turned to being an editor, which is not something she enjoys doing, but because of the loss of her husband, the grief that she continually is enduring, and her alcoholism, she's no longer the person she once was. And her boss would love to see her try to do new things again, would like to see her become a writer again because he believes in her, but recognizes that she's got a lot going on and she's no longer the person she was. Not long into the film, though, her son, one of two, actually ends up dying. This son was actually a drug addict, and she hadn't really seen him often anymore. They hadn't really had a good relationship anymore, and she finds out this news via her other son, who is a police officer, played by Reynor. He comes to tell his mom that his brother and her son have passed away in some sort of drug altercation. He was shot to death. And not long into the film, when we're at the funeral for her son, that's when we're introduced to the character of Olivia Cooke, who is actually the current girlfriend, also a drug addict, who's now pregnant with the child of Hilary Swank's son. And so together they actually work together to build a new bond. Now you have this mother, played by Hilary Swank, who's dealing with Olivia Cooke's character, who she kind of has resentment towards. She feels like she kind of pulled her son away from her. She feels like she's slightly responsible for why he was addicted to drugs in general, but kind of starts to grow a relationship with her now that she is pregnant with her grandchild, and wants to kind of see if they can solve what actually happened to Hilary Swank's son in this movie. And throughout the course of the film, you have Reynor, the other son, also helping alongside in this investigation. And that's pretty much the base premise. I don't want to get too much further into it because I don't want to spoil anything for you. But what I can say about this movie right out of the gate is that this is a perfect example of a movie that just lost me along the way. I found the film to be very well acted throughout. There was nothing about the performances that took me out of it. It was well shot. There's a good eerie tone to the film at times. And I think for the most part, the film does a good job of really tackling the idea of grief and the damage that it can cause to a family, a household, or just an individual. And I really enjoyed Hilary Swank's performance throughout the most of the film. I found her to be the most compelling character here and the one I was connected to the most. But unfortunately, this is a film that just lost me, especially as we got into the third act. This is a slower paced film, so to an extent I was okay with the fact that the film dragged in some areas and it wasn't necessarily the most exciting or entertaining film, but I was really curious to see where it would go. But as we went into the third act, there's a big twist that kind of, I feel, was meant to recontextualize the whole movie, but kind of just felt random and just kind of felt underexplained. The movie ends with some sort of resolution, but quite frankly, I found that by the time we got to the end of the film, there were some things that were just left wide open that quite frankly left me wildly unsatisfied. Again, I think that there are some good elements here. I think the performances are solid throughout, most notably, specifically from Hilary Swank as well as Olivia Cooke. And I think that even all the supporting characters in general are done pretty solidly in here. I think the tone is pretty solid throughout as well. And there's a lot that's going on behind the camera on a filmmaking level that I do think was done correctly. But when it comes down to the narrative and just something that's going to be a narrative or a story that you're going to want to, suggest to your friends or revisit again at some point, or it's something that made me feel something that was impactful. Quite frankly, this movie didn't have that for me. By the time we got to the third act and there's this twist that kind of changes things up and tries to make you kind of feel shocked, I ultimately just kind of felt hollow when that twist actually happened near the end of the film. Again, I feel like it was meant to kind of shock the audience and recontextualize the movie in a lot of ways, but oftentimes just kind of made me scratch my head, made me think, okay, how are they going to kind of wrap this up with the way that they're kind of taking this narrative? And by the time it got to the end, again, I just felt unsatisfied. I felt bored. I felt dull. The credits started rolling and I literally felt nothing. Whereas I can look at the earlier part of the film as I was really intrigued to see where things would go, and as I was really feeling for these characters after the loss of somebody important in their life. And I can honestly say that just I lost interest minute by minute as the movie went on. Again, I think it's a well-made film in a lot of ways. I don't necessarily think it's a poorly made film, but this is just a film that has a narrative that ultimately just lost me as time went on, left me incredibly bored. I think the pacing just dragged in the worst ways, and by the time the movie was over, it wasn't even one of those movies where I could say, yeah, this is a slow burn film, it's going to be really slow, it's got some slow pacing, but the payoff at the end is really solid. Unfortunately, we got to the end of the film and I didn't care about anything or anyone in this film, and I just felt again that really unsatisfied with the way the movie ended. And I honestly don't have an abundance more to say on this movie. It's a pretty straightforward premise. There's a mystery to the whole thing. Somebody's died, and you kind of have these two individuals, specifically Hilary Swank and Olivia Cooke, working together to try to discover who it is that was responsible for the death of this person that they both individually love, while there's also a baby that's coming into the family as well. Even though there's some resentment and there's grief and different things like that, and a lot of really good elements, it ultimately just led to a very bland and forgettable story that I don't foresee myself revisiting anytime soon. So with all that said, I don't necessarily recommend The Good Mother, but if you end up checking it out at some point and that's what brought you to this review weeks or months down the line, please leave any and all comments down below. And for any of my returning viewers who just saw this review and maybe you don't even know what this movie is all about, is this something you're looking to check out? Is this something that's been on your radar? Whatever the case may be, leave any and all comments down below, and I'll see you beautiful people in the next one. Bye-bye.